All right, folks, I'm filming a little video about my truck again. Now, on my last video about my truck, we talked about different heater blower motors, so go find that if you need to. This is a 1983 Chevy Silverado. And so I noticed a thing a couple days ago where whenever I turned off the truck, I would hear like a rattling noise, and it would rattle like almost like a tin can kind of flinging around. And so I noticed after it only did it when you turned off the engine. So as it was kind of spinning down, you would hear like something rattling like a tin can. What in the world? So I had my brother check it out, and he discovered that the harmonic balancer has broken in half. So basically the balancer has rubber in the middle of it, and the outside ring of the balancer is no longer attached to the inside ring of the balancer. So it's spinning around. Some people call it the dampener. It's spinning around doing crazy stuff the whole time I'm driving, I guess. So I put the kibosh on driving it for too much, and I drove it down here to work today, and I'm going to change the harmonic balancer out in the front of my store, which is not the easiest job, but it's not too bad. So I figured maybe I'd video some of it so you can see what's involved. This is an 83 Silverado, and it's got AC and stuff in the way, but really, if you look, it's not too hard to get down there. Now, I've also got an oil leak down there, which I'm pretty sure is probably on the front of the oil pan. But you probably have to take the oil pan off to fix that, right? So I might try to put some silicone on it from the outside just to see if it stops any of it, but that's a pretty big job that I'm not really prepared to do. But I am going to have to take that harmonic balancer off, because if I keep driving it like this, it's going to destroy the engine probably. So these people just moved from my preferred spot down there, so I think I'll back the truck up a little bit, and then I'll start taking off some of this stuff from the top. You can do it from the bottom. There's pretty good clearance on the bottom, but the honest truth is, today's New Year's Day, and we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's the coldest day of the year. I'm freaking freezing out here. So I don't really want to be laying on the ground. Can you see my breath there? So what we're going to do is we're going to do it from the top. So I'm going to start taking some of the stuff off, and we'll see what we can do. All right, folks. So this is 30 minutes later, and I do not work fast. I work slow and methodically. Everybody gets mad at me. So what I'm saying is, if you just take your time, it only takes 30 minutes to get everything off. So I had to take the shroud off first. And like I was saying, this is an air car, or an air truck, so this caused a problem because it's right over the shroud. You can't take it off because, of course, you'd lose the charge in your AC system. So I took it loose from the shroud, of course, and then I took the shroud loose from the two top points on the radiator, and then I took the top half of the shroud loose because there's no way you can get the whole thing out. Now, you could probably just take the fan off, take the fan out, and then get the shroud out. That might be the easier way. But what I tried to do was take just the top off. Of course, this was in the way. So I took the radiator hose loose, pulled this up, and you have to be very careful. Don't just pull on it, because if you break this fitting down here, if you screw up this fitting, you're screwed. So I held it here and just manipulated it. That's how I'm going to describe that. I manipulated it, people. Manipulated it out of the way just slightly, and then I was able to pull the top half of the shroud out the side. So this is what that looks like. All right, so once I did that, I had to take the belts off, which was very easy then. So I just loosened the alternator bolt, and then the one below it. It slides down on that bracket, obviously, from here to here. Put slack on the belt, you can pull the belt off. And then on the AC, which goes around the AC and the power steering pump, you've got 3 bolts, one here, one on the back, and one over here. You loosen them and it'll pivot it in, pull the belt off. Power steering pump, it's got just one bolt down here on mine. I've seen there's other setups, and one of my bolts isn't on there, this top one. The nut's missing. That's because that thing's stripped out. We've tried putting another nut on it, it's all screwed up. And then you've got one down there below that needs to be loose so it can pivot. You can see all the grime on this thing. This engine runs great. This is the original engine from 1983. It's got about 100,000 miles on it, but it's never been rebuilt or anything, but it's got a bad oil leak. So that's the only drawback of it. That's what's going to eventually make me need to rebuild the motor. So once I took those off, the 3 fan belts off, I had the fan staring me in the face, which you could probably work around, but it's so easy to take it off. You've got 4 little 1/4 inch bolts there, so I just took the nuts off, which, you know, they broke loose by hand really easy. It will try to spin on you whenever you turn it, but if you hold the pulley, usually you can break it loose by hand. And so I took those off and then took the pulley off. So in the back of my truck, I now have the fan shroud, the 3 belts, which I laid how they were on the truck, just to make it easier on me whenever I go to put them back. My fan with the what do they even call that? I can't remember, on the front, and the pulley off the water pump. So next thing I'm going to do is I am now down to the harmonic balancer, and it's got that big pulley on the front, which I believe is held on by 4 bolts. So I'm going to take that off next. You can see how you could get to it from underneath. You know, all this stuff I took off, I guess you would still have to loosen the belts because they're all around that pulley, but I don't know. I just like standing up. That's the thing. So I'll see if I can get that sucker off, and then we'll look at that harmonic balancer that is broke in half and see what we can do about that. All right, so I got the pulley off. There were 3 bolts, obviously, and a big center bolt. And so I'm gonna have my brother Joe reach in there and show you what's wrong with the harmonic balancer. So it's still mounted in the truck. Reach in there and grab the edge of the harmonic balancer, Joe. There you go. So now I got to take off what's left. All right, folks, so we finally got her off with our trusty harmonic balancer puller. And of course, the new one's on the left, the old one is on the right. You can see that it had actually broken into 2 pieces because the rubber ring in the center there had all broken loose. I have no clue how long it's been like that, but that's not good. You can also see where the front of the engine has oil all over it. I was going to try to put some silicone on that bottom, try to make you can't really do this too well, but try to make a silicone barrier on that. Yeah, I'm sure it's leaking at the bottom of the timing chain cover and the oil pan, but it's so damn cold I just can't get to it right now. I tried putting some sealant on there, that didn't work too well. So when it warms up a little bit, I can just lay down underneath and work on that. It's not like I said earlier, I pretty much need to take the oil pan off to do it right, but I really don't have that option right now. And it's not leaking so bad that I can't drive it or anything, but it's annoying. All right, so we're gonna try to press the new one on and see what happens. All right, folks, so we got it back together and I've let it run a little bit and everything seems good. Basically, it ended up, if you're planning on doing this yourself, it took us about 30 minutes to take everything apart and get down to where all the bolts were out of the harmonic balancer, and it needed pulled. We used one of those little cheap pullers, the little 3 thing, the cheap ones. If you go to the store, look at the $20 one, that's the one we're talking about, and stripped the freaking thing because I believe this is the original harmonic balancer, so I think it was stuck on there. And we ended up stripping the bolt on the puller. We tried to get to the store again. You know, it's January 1st, so there wasn't all that. We didn't have too many options, and we kind of had to do it with what we had here available locally. So we went back, couldn't find a better harmonic balancer puller, so we ended up buying another cheap one and sprayed PB Blaster all over the, which is you know, it's like to remove rusted bolts and stuff. I don't think it was really rusted, but I sprayed that stuff all over it to finally get it off. The process of removing it took about an hour, just because we didn't have the right equipment. So if you're planning on doing this, my advice would be to order a nice harmonic balancer puller. And then the other problem you're going to have is order a nice harmonic balancer installer, like something to put it on with, which they do make stuff that's the proper tool to install it with. We didn't have that, so we're trying to do it with the freaking bolt. Basically, whenever you put it back on there, you need to get it up on the, of course there's a little keyway, so you get it lined up, and then you need to get it up all the way on the shaft. That is really tough. Depending on, I've had other ones that I've done where it just kind of slid on, but this one, it just would not go on. It's really cold though, so we're thinking that maybe heat would have helped it. Maybe since it was such a cold day, it just wasn't, things had expanded slightly or something. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the only thing I can think. The harmonic balancer we used was a Dorman. This is a Chevy 350. We used the Dorman. It seemed to me like it was pretty tight, and I was reading some reviews online. A couple guys said it worked great, but one guy did mention that his was too tight. He had to shave it down a little bit. So if you're working with limited tools like we are here at my store, you may want to consider ordering a really nice, something that can press it on with, and a really nice extractor. But we got it back together. It took, so because of that, just to get it far enough on there to where the pulley's lined up, it took us about probably 2 hours. Today is actually the next day. It got too dark last night to where we couldn't keep filming. But we got everything on there, got everything lined up, and then it took about 25 minutes to put the stuff back on. So with the proper tools, I think it's about a 2-hour job. With the incorrect tools, you might end up screwing around with it for 4 or 5 hours. But it's not something super complicated. So, but what I've learned from this is buy a nice harmonic balancer puller and buy something that installs it better than a bolt. We tried putting the bolt in, but the problem you run into is if it's too far out, the bolt won't thread in right. You can just barely get the end of the threads, and if you try to tighten that thing up to make it pull that balancer on there, what you're going to do is put all kinds of stress on the last 2 threads. So we ended up screwing up one of the threads on the bolt, had to go to the store and buy another bolt, but again, they're not long enough. It's a 7/16 bolt with 20 threads, a 7/16/20 bolt, and it's 2.25 inches long on a Chevy 350. Perhaps if you had one that was 3 inches long, you could thread it in and there would be enough bolts, enough threads in there to pull that thing on, but I think you're better off with a more professional solution than trying to pull it on with the bolt, because you're going to screw up those threads, which luckily we didn't do and ended up getting it on there. But everything seems to be running good now, and we knocked it out, so there we go. If you enjoyed the video, leave comments below. If there was a way I could have done this better, which I'm sure there is, go ahead and leave your comments below. Of course, I'm obviously not a mechanic, but I did get it going again. So leave your comments below about how you prefer to do it, and if you've got a link to any good tools for installing that sucker or removing that sucker, post those below too, and I'll approve the messages to make sure everybody that finds this video can find those tools. And I'll see you on the next video.